lenders consider settling. Sorry about that. So although, what was I saying? Yeah, taking out a mortgage is itself not a red flag. It's the bankers and other lenders consider settling a large mortgage after a short period as a red flag. And this is what we need to be aware of. Of course, then there is the third method, the use of third parties. So here we have launderers. They can choose to use third parties, and these are usually their friends, business associates, or even family members to buy real estate on their behalf. So in this case, yeah, the launderer will supply the funds for the property's purchase to a third party who will then purchase the property and become the legal owner of the property. But ultimately, the control of the property is with the launderer himself. So on the face of it, you think it's Leila Latif who owns this property, but indeed it's the criminal Parita who's actually controlling it. Sorry, Parita. Anyway, so this sort of method, the use of third parties, it actually avoids any direct involvement in the transaction and in the money laundering process. So you don't really get to know the real owner. Yeah. Then we have the fourth method. And this is the use of shell companies or front companies, trusts, foundations. These are things we talked about yesterday, right? They can also be used to purchase real estate for the purposes of laundering illicit funds. Okay, so when you're told, or rather when you figure out that the company is a shell company, that in itself is a red flag. So this laundering method, it works similar to the method we've just talked about, the use of third parties, because the properties are held in the name of the legal entities, allowing the launderers to distance themselves from ownership and therefore maintain their anonymity. Now, of course, we're coming in a few minutes. I'll have finished my presentation, so just bear with me. This is the fifth method right now. And, professional facilitators like ourselves, lawyers, or gatekeepers such as accountants, financial advisors, real estate agents, even company service providers can wittingly or unwittingly, just using the words that were used in the chat, help criminals launder money through real estate. Now, such services can also provide anonymity to the launderer and add distance between the launderer and his or her financial activity and assets. So these professional facilitators or gatekeepers, they also impart apparent legitimacy to the transaction. Yeah, so the example that Robert had given us in the chat, that can actually help explain how they provide this apparent legitimacy. And then again, you can have criminals or launderers, they hire multiple professionals throughout the process with the sole aim of just complicating the money trail. So some examples of the services that professional facilitators offer, and that can be used to further money laundering activity through the use of real estate, are the ones that I have listed up here. So it is through, establishing and maintaining domestic or foreign legal entity structures, offshore companies, for example, shell companies, trust funds, facilitating the setup and transfer of the ownership of property, including to third parties, right? So they know that they're setting up, they're buying house for Leila, but the intended owner who's going to control the property is Parita. They can also assist with or conduct transactions on behalf of the criminal receiving and transferring funds. Usually bespoke firms do this. Mossack Fonseca is an example. They can create financial arrangements unknowingly that they're doing so for purposes of helping somebody launder illicit gains. They also provide access to financial institutions and other service providers. Because you're a lawyer, when you deal with the bank assumes because you're a professional, you've conducted all due diligence and they will accept whatever information you give them without really conducting in-depth scrutiny. Yeah, so you provide legitimacy. You're seen as the agent of legitimacy. And also some of the other professional services are offering financial, tax, and legal advice through which either method 1, 2, 3, or 4 be utilized to help your client launder his proceeds. And finally, we look at the last method, which is method 6. This is a quite common method, and it's a method which we need to be aware of, because through it we are able to pick up on the red flags. So money can also be laundered through real estate by renting properties to generate rental income. I had said this at the start. So using this method, the launderer legitimizes his or her or their ill-gotten gains by providing the tenant with illicit funds to cover the rent payments, either partially or in full. So in this way, the launderer is actually using the tenant to help wash the launderer's dirty funds, right? So you just go and it's something similar to what I talked about yesterday when I mentioned the money mules, right? Here you go and look for a tenant, you put him in a posh house, use your own money, give it to the tenant, tell the tenant, pay me this amount as rent, because on paper it then looks legitimate. So in another version of this scheme, a criminal may purchase a property in the name of a third party and then pretend to rent the property from the third party and pay the rent using illicit funds. So this method serves to disguise both the illicit funds and the property's ownership. And yet, in a third iteration of this scheme, method 6 that we've just looked at, criminals can create a fictitious rental account, right? And then they deposit their illicit funds into the account as rent, giving the appearance of legitimate rental income. So these illicit funds can be commingled with the legitimate rental income in one rental account, and then be integrated into the financial sector. So this, ladies and gentlemen, are some of the methods that are used by launderers, by criminals, to be able to manipulate the real estate sector for purposes of washing their dirty money, right? So that's that. And Parita, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Laila. This was also very eye-opening for some of us. We have very good comments here, and people are really, really enjoying. Yes. So I had a question that, but the housing estates are well known for IFFs, as you have already explained. So is it now that Europe is realizing that there is a lot of illegality in terms of housing estates? And is that the reason why they're blocking the wealth of the Russian oligarchs? And also, it's not even housing itself, but football clubs, yachts. I mean, there's clear evidence which even indicates that many European politicians were equally involved. And to answer that, Agaba is actually responding that she thinks it's because of the need to punish the oligarchs that this is why it is happening. And then Ismail adds another thing just based on that. I'm continuing because it's a flow. He asked a question on environmental lawyers because again it is the oligarchs, the well-known household names who are known to be the greenhouse emitters. And if there's another final, yes, Daniel says, bravo, the knowledge sharing is excellent. So back to you, Laila.
Yeah, so I was also just monitoring the chat, lots of private messages as well. Try to respond to them as much as I can. So you see, this is not Europe has caught up on knowledge about real estate being used as launderers right now. This is information that has been well known, right? They've known this for centuries. It's not even that it's fresh for Africans, right? We know this. It's a political game as well. Recently London has taken the global top spot for the sale of luxury residential real estate You go to London, the amount of Pakistanis and Saudis and Russians who own luxury properties there is just, you know, phenomenal. You've got wealthy foreigners buying more and more homes there than in any other city in the world. And this is not me saying this. This is the Financial Times that has reported this. So even you know, during the coronavirus travel restrictions and lockdowns, the purchase of properties in London did not decrease. In fact, the demand for some of these so-called super prime properties increased. They were being listed at 10 million, you know, pounds at that particular time, but it went all the way up to 18.6 million. And most of the people buying these properties were Russian, French, and Chinese purchasers. Right. We also had some of our politicians from Nairobi also, you know, buying a house or two here. So it's not that this is not known, but you look at the people who are investing in these properties are politicians. And in as much as we say lawyers are gatekeepers, right? They're the ones who can facilitate and enable flow of money through money laundering activities. But when you have a politician involved, and especially a politician highly influential at the executive level, you know, and then you have financial institutions that cater to their needs, this thing is beyond the role of law in terms of stopping it, right? So again, the property market is regulated by the politicians, it's regulated through the political landscape. So it is known. And laws, again, the policymakers, the legislative drafters who write this law, it is passed in parliament. And the parliamentarians are the ones, or the politicians, who, number one, are the first gatekeepers to ensure that some of these transactions remain anonymous, and then that there is no regulation so that these things can continue, because the beneficiaries are themselves. Right. So these are the things that we need to think about when we think of real estate investments. So that's what I'd probably want to say about to your response. Yeah. Then somebody asked, what is beneficial ownership? So beneficial ownership is just getting to know who the true owner basically is. Right? Who is the beneficiary of the income or the assets at the last stage, right? So again, very good TED Ed videos and other videos that have been put up by Tax Justice Network, Afrodad, and other civil societies that explain all this. The OECD also has short animations together with the Tax Inspectors Without Borders. They have some short videos that actually explain some of these themes. It's good to look into their websites and have a broader understanding of what all these mean. Um, so I have a question. It's a private, direct message. I'll just read it out without mentioning the name of the person. It says, I don't think that there is an issue of awareness in relation with the IFFs or tax evasion from lawyers. I am more inclined to think that in the light of confidentiality, our colleagues that are not that having core values or ethical boundaries purposely and willingly aid their clients to move forward with this disease. So the issue, it seems to me, is to find a common ground globally or regionally to fight this issue by implementing regulations that would be binding to all actors. I thoroughly agree with your point. And sorry, the only reason I don't have my video switched on is because of data problems. So I'm just trying to save it. The UN FACTI panel report, it did come up with a number of recommendations, right, to deal with curbing and fighting against illicit financial flows. And some of these recommendations that are being proposed are implementing regulations that will be binding to all actors, be they, you know, the financial institutions, the financial actors, the lawyers, how we draft laws, and how we create and structure corporate vehicles. So that's something that we need to reflect on. It would be good. Currently, we're debating principles. the UN FACTI has proposed that every person who engages with transactions must embed the values of financial accountability, transparency, and integrity. Having a principle-based system would lead to some control of illicit financial flows. But again, this has to be tested on a case-by-case basis. Is there anybody who would like to just take the floor, ask their question, or even make a contribution, even give any explanation or share any experience with us? You can definitely have the floor. It'll be really nice to hear your voices as well.
Laila, may I please share something?
Yes, Parita.
Thank you. You see, it's really surprising that how politicians are able to buy houses in London, if you look at the Kenyan politicians, because I know when I went to the UK in 2019 and I asked if I could open a bank account there, I was asked, do you have evidence that you reside here? Your house number, your location, evidence that you yourself have bought a house here, and I did not have, and because of that I couldn't open a bank account. So I find it really difficult to understand how can politicians have bank accounts there, because it's all direct transactions, and how can they buy houses there? I mean, and also, why is it not that countries do not allow non-residents to buy houses in countries where they do not reside, especially if they know there's a way to detect that the money is legal? Thank you.
Rita, I'm sorry, I'm not following your question. You've been breaking. And I'm also wary about time. We're already 20 minutes past the webinar session. So let me just tackle a few questions, and any further questions we could discuss it later. So Ismail says that since they are environmental lawyers, how can the government and not necessarily NGOs pull these environmental lawyers together so that they can act as environmental gatekeepers as well, rather than dealing with individual clients only, since the government has a right also? If possible, kindly explain. Thank you. Ismail, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question very well. Just how government pull environmental lawyers. Maybe, Ismail, we can have a one-on-one conversation about what precisely you're asking me, because how can government and not necessarily NGOs pull environmental lawyers together so they act as environmental gatekeepers? But how is this related? Okay, so probably if there's somebody involved in wildlife trafficking, or the sale of the illegal sale of elephant tusks or rhino horns, maybe that's the context in which you're trying to ask this question, that if we have lawyers, can they be involved in ensuring that such trafficking is not taking place? But I do not think at what point lawyers are even involved in such cases, because these are criminal cases, and it's the government that would prosecute these issues. And obviously the prosecutor would be a lawyer. So let's have this discussion, you and I, one-on-one, so that I can understand it better and give you a better answer idea, because right now Kichwa haifanyi kazi, I can't really think, right? Parita, your comments are noted. Absolutely, Tabitha, your point is also noted. Okay, Ismail, bravo. All right.
Sorry, network is really bad today.
So I know. So Robert, it's interesting when you say churches in Kenya also facilitate IFFs through political harambes. Okay, Robert, currently the situation, and let's not get involved for this moment. We'll space on this later. But I think, Parita, I'm happy to wrap up the session right now if there are no further questions. As usual, please, if there are any questions, email me. Those people who have already emailed me, I am going to respond to your questions today, so please wait for my email. And I really thank you for engaging with us. Parita, back to you.
Laila, if you could tackle one of the questions which has come from Amos Moments Kenya, please. I once saw a client walk in Chambers in 2019 with a bag packed with 500,000 euros, equivalent to 60 million Kenya shillings, with instructions for us to invest in real estate on his behalf. When we started interrogating him on the source of his money, the client became very evasive and we told him we cannot act upon his instructions. So this is an example of
Fantastic.
where lawyers think that this is illegally brought in money.
I think that was really a thing of integrity to do, because that's definitely a red flag when a client comes in and becomes invasive in terms of not telling you where their source of money has been gotten from. So it's good to know that that is what Bowman's actually did. I wonder if you went ahead to also report this or escalate it to, the central organization for controlling AML in Kenya. Because that's where now the debate comes in. Do you have a duty to escalate this going further or not? So that's where we are all kind of lingering on. But that's a very good example. I think probably if you would have known Robert, you should have sent this client to Robert. Robert, I'm just playing.
But on the same note, Laila, do lawyers actually invest in property?
Parita.
Laila.
Yes.
Do lawyers also invest in property?
Yes. Majority of the big law firms have invested in properties as one way to also earn additional income with which to grow their legal practice. But
Okay.
Parita, we really need to end the session now.
Yes.
People have to go. We're off
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I think as the day grows, every next day of this webinar is becoming more lively, more interactive, and there's a lot of discussions and lot of learning. We will put the recordings on the Padlet, which everybody will be able to access.
I think, okay, we've lost Parita because of our internet, but again, thank you very much for joining us. It was really a privilege to have you, and please keep in touch and watch this space for more upcoming training videos. Really sorry about the internet interruptions today, but we'll do our best next time. Thank you very much and goodbye.